rice, eaten by 3.5 billion people on the planet, is central to life in Asia. From this vital grain came the first wines known to mankind. Unique noodles that have existed since ancient times. And an Indian food secret that makes a power-packed breakfast. Ferments that have shaped the identities of an entire continent. In the cold, harsh winds of the Kanto Plain, an integral grain of the Japanese diet flourishes. Drawing from clear stream waters of the area, brewers turn a choice few varieties of Ibaraki's rice into a traditional, sweet and nourishing beverage. Amazake. North of Joso City, an hour from Tokyo. Yamanaka-san owns and runs an old brewery that's been in operation for 8 generations.
こんにちは。山中直明と申します。山中酒造店の専務をしております。
The Yamanaka House is famed for its award-winning sakes, created through a unique process that produces a dry, smooth, and delicious liquor. On the side, they produce a non-alcoholic version known as Amazake, a drink that dates back to 300 AD. Traditionally served at inns, temples, and festivals. To make either, you first need the right type of rice.
最終的に、その酒造業に落ち着いたっていう、この辺りはお米がたくさん取れますので、地場のお米を主体でやってますんで。
Shuzo kotekimai or sakamai are specific sake-making grains, usually bigger with larger starch cores. The selected grains are carefully milled and polished to a crystal-like state that's necessary for a smooth-tasting sake. Washed of impurities, the grains are dunked in water for precisely 8 minutes, activating the starches. The amount of soaking depends on the weather and water temperature. Colder water demands more time. The bags drain naturally. Shaking off the water is forbidden, so as not to break up the grains. In an industrial steamer, the rice begins to cook. It's checked around the 50-minute mark to make sure it hasn't gone too soft. Steamed rice is the base for cultivating koji. Koji is cooked grains that have been inoculated with Aspergillus oryzae, also known as the koji mould. Dubbed the national mould of Japan, it was introduced to the archipelago as early as the 8th century and used by Buddhist monks for sake production. It's the Eastern version of malt, and many Japanese foods like soy sauce, miso, or mirin would not have existed without it. Once the steamy rice has cooled to 32 degrees Celsius, the spores of the koji mould are sprinkled over it. Koji, like most molds, grows in hot, humid environments. In the process, it releases generous amounts of two key enzymes, amylase and protease, that's used to break down starchy foods. After one night, Yamanaka-san checks in on the koji. When koji mold grows, it generates heat. So the rice needs to be tossed onto smaller wooden trays, disentangled and cooled off. This breaks up the clumps and aerates the rice. In a day's time, this batch of koji will be ready for brewing. Singapore, a compact city-state founded and built by immigrants. One of the country's first settlers and its third largest ethnic group are Indians. With several thousand castes, tribes, religious and linguistic groups, Indian cuisine is as colorful as the people who make it. But if there's one culinary delight that's captured the taste buds of millions at home and beyond, it's the sharp, soured taste of fermented rice batter. Little India is an ethnic enclave in central Singapore. It's where home chef Vasuntara revels in. Here, she finds all the ingredients needed to cook up an authentic Indian feast. Vasun's passion is South Indian fermentation. Her earliest food memory is a South Indian breakfast dumpling made from fermented urad dal and rice batter. Paniyaram is a close cousin of the thosai, arguably one of the most popular dishes in India. The version she makes is a specific recipe from Chettinad that calls for black glutinous rice in addition to the usual dal and idli rice.
The Chettiars traveled and they had businesses in Southeast Asia. They adopted and they brought back to South India the Southeast Asian black glutinous rice.
The grains are soaked for 8 to 10 hours. They begin fermenting and softening in the water, making them easier to crush later.
So you will soak it until you can break the grains like this. Then it's ready and you see all these bubbles.
The dal and idli rice are wet ground in a stone grinder. Doing so releases the mucilaginous texture of the lentils, which traps air to create a foamy paste.
So this is better for the fermentation because it has less heat, whereas the mechanized one will kill the microbes.
To know if they're perfectly aerated, Vasun relies on this simple test. The faster it floats to the surface, the better it is.
Over the float test also means that your bean is very fresh. And so the fresher the bean, because the microbes are on the surface, so you want the freshest possible grain, lentil, whatever you want to use that you can get your hands on.
The rice mixture is incorporated into the batter, and the microbes, naturally present in the grains, water, and air, are left to do their work. At 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, the mixture ferments away, and overnight will double in size. In Singapore, a blend of rice and dal has been fermenting for over 10 hours in the kitchen of home chef Vasuntara. Fermented rice, rich in body-friendly microflora, has been an integral part of the Indian diet for centuries. A breakfast superfood consumed in various forms across the country. Lactic acid bacteria have hydrolyzed the starches in the grains and produced carbon dioxide, alcohol, and lactic acid. The result is a leavened, soured batter.
You have to control the fermentation a little bit because of our humidity in Singapore. So what I do is I add salt, and salt actually retards the fermentation so you can lengthen it. And in all fermentation, the longer you ferment up to a certain point, the more complex the flavors are.
The size of the bubbles indicates that the batter has fermented to the optimal fluffiness to be turned into paniyarams. Various ingredients like onions, curry leaves, and green chili are added for flavor. Optionally, the batter can also be tempered with spices to infuse South Indian flavors.
So I fill with a bit of oil.
In a special pan known as a chatti or kal, the batter is fried to a satisfying golden color and filled with a flavorful and aromatic core. Soft and fluffy on the inside, crisp and crusty on the outside. This delicious dumpling brightens just about any breakfast table. Over in Thailand, long known as the rice bowl of Asia, and the world's second largest exporter of the grain. Rice is the country's most consumed food and a central part of its culture. A labor-intensive process produces one of its most popular rice dishes. Long, round, chewy, Kanom Jeem. It's a flavor that most of Thailand is familiar with. Every region has its own unique way of consuming the fermented rice noodle known as Kanom Jeem. The origin of the noodles is believed to be Mon, an ethnic group that ruled central Thailand from the 6th to 11th centuries. The dish took its name from a major water artery in the Ayutthaya province. In ancient times, it was an easy dish to serve at occasions and ceremonies with lots of people to feed. You simply put the noodles in a bowl and pour curry over it. The authentic way to make Kanom Jeem is to use fermented flour. Protein is the second most abundant ingredient in rice and affects the texture of cooked rice. Immersing the raw grains in water creates a low-oxygen environment for lactic acid bacteria to hydrolyze the protein in rice, resulting in the chewy mouthfeel of the noodles. In Joso, Japan, the height of summer prompts the Yamanaka Sake House to suspend production of its namesake beverage in favor of sweet, non-alcoholic Amazake, heralded as a remedy for heat fatigue, amongst other things. Koji that has fermented for 48 hours has attained the right texture and quantity of mould to be used as a fermenting agent. It's taken out of the warm and humid koji room to cool and breathe. The excess can be kept in the fridge to be used later. In a sanitized metal tank, a mixture of river and well water from the area is heated to 55 degrees Celsius. At this temperature, the enzyme amylase, provided by the koji, works at optimal efficiency, devouring the starches in cooked rice in a process known as saccharification.
でんぷんを糖化して甘くするっていう作用がうまく進むっていうことになると思うんですね。
The liquid is stirred regularly to mash up any clumps. 10 to 14 hours later, the amazake is done. Yamanaka-san bottles the drink in the morning, manually removing any millet and rice chunks from the liquid. The amazake made with his unique artisanal process has a mellow sweetness and sharpness. Brimming with health benefits and drunk throughout the seasons, Japan's original energy drink might have fallen out of favor for several decades, but has certainly made a comeback in recent years. In Chiang Mai, factories like this one make 1,000 kilograms of the ubiquitous rice noodle Kanom Jeem daily. After fermenting naturally in water for a few days, the protein content and composition of rice has been altered. Pounding it into flour. And boiling that to a slurry. produces beautifully white, elastic and tangy strands of noodles. As they tend to spoil quickly, they are immediately stacked and sold or consumed. This restaurant makes one of the most popular Kanom Jeem dishes, a namya or coconut-based fish curry to top off the rice noodles. It calls for freshwater fish like snakehead and copious amounts of a plant known as fingerroot to help temper the curry's fishy flavors. Rich and thick from the minced fish and coconut milk, and packed with spices and flavors of turmeric, lemongrass, and dried chilies. It's the perfect noodle coating sauce for soft, silky Kanom Jeem. Fermentation, our oldest biological tool. A tool that produces wonderfully different results in different hands. Preserving food, history, and heritage.